Welcome back to the series on creating custom widgets in Workspace ONE Intelligence. This is part 2, looking at creating time series widgets. So we covered what time series data is in the first part, but to answer what use cases it covers is things like this. So when did my device get an OS update? Or looking at how many devices received that OS update in the past or over the last 7 days per day. When did my device experience an app crash? Or how many times did it experience that app crash over a time range? Or how many times did the app crash in general across all my devices? And then, so that's all the event data, those 4 first use cases. So again, these are not states, right? This is not my device is in an app crash states. These are things that happen to the device. So there's no state involved, but a timestamp of when it occurred. So these are things like logon, boot, app foreground, OS crash, app crash, network connections, are all events where you use this data. If you want to know when those things occurred, you could target that event and use this data to find it. The other type of data is performance data that we use in time series data. So these are things that we capture on a high frequency, and they change on each sample. So things like CPU usage, we capture every 15 seconds. So if you want to see the average CPU usage over 24 hours, that's how you do that. You don't want to count these events up because they come every 15 seconds. You want to take the value of the event and then aggregate that. And the same thing goes for like duration, like boot. So you have a boot event, but you care about the duration of that event. Or an app foreground event, but you care about the duration of that event. So you're actually aggregating the duration across the time range and not the events themselves. I'll show you what that makes sense when we go through it. So again, how you find what data is time series data, you come to the data dictionary, and you can see the type of data time series data. And most of the DEX data is time series, like Intelligence SDK or Workspace ONE Experience Management. So here are all the time series events. And what events are in each, you can find out by coming here to the left. Experience data management, desktops physical, experience management for Mac and OS as an example. And there's a column called event name, which will tell you for the employee experience apps data, here are all the events. And this is really important to when you want to count up these things, you want to have to filter on them first. So with that said, that's the next part is what are the pieces of the widget that I need to know and what should I do first? So actually the first thing you want to do is come down here to the filter section and always filter on the event name to make sure you're looking at the specific event that you care about. And then like app crash or boot or app launch, and then you come up here and you can start your analysis. So measure, which again is the y-axis. You're counting up events. So I want to count up how many events happened that met the following criteria over a time range. And again, the other type of data is performance data or duration, as mentioned before. So average CPU usage or sum of duration. Now group by is splitting up the y-axis or those aggregations by common groups that you decide. So how many app crashes by app version is an example. Or if you want to split up the performance data by that same group, so app CPU usage by app version, you can do that as well. And then results per group, again, if the group by you're doing is like 100 different groups as a result, and you want to show the top results, that's what results per group is. So this is just an integer, like 10. It's also known as cardinality. And then if you're using a table chart, this is where add subgroups comes in, and is really helpful because you can do up to 5 different subgroups of that data. We mentioned filtering. Always use filter to get the event name, but if you also want to use it to reduce the data set to specific platforms or specific app names, that's where you use filters. I'll show you that live. The date range is really important because that's, again, time series data. You're aggregating over a time range. This can be an absolute or relative time range. Relative meaning last 28 days, last 7 days, or an absolute time range saying this date, like February 1st through February 2nd, sometime in the past from 12 to 12 p.m. Frequency is, so the date range is, if counting and aggregating is the y-axis, the date range is the x-axis. And just like you can group by the y-axis by specific groups, you can group the x-axis or dates or time by a frequency, which is just a smaller time frame of the entire date range. So if I want to know how many app crashes per day over the last 28 days, the date range is 28, the frequency is per day. But if I want to know how many app crashes in the last 28 days over the entire date range, I would just make the date range equal, or the frequency equal the date range. So I'd set the frequency to the entire date range, and then I don't care about per day, I just care about the total crashes over that date range. I'll show you that as well. A widget. And I know the employee experience apps data is time series data. And like I said, the first thing I want to do is filter on the event that I care about, which according to the data dictionary, I have all these things. I care about app crash. And then I'm counting event ID. Notice I'm not counting device names. I'm counting the events. And this should give me some very large number. All right. So 160,000 last 28 days. Remember, if I want to see this per day, I change that frequency to last 28 days. I want to see the count of crashes per day. It'll give me this. So a lot of crashes. Now, I want to dwindle this down to find out what I'm looking for. So let's make this Windows. So that should cut the amount of devices I'm counting in half, but we'll see how it affects the actual crashes. Okay, not too much. Now, what apps are causing the crash? So I can take this and do binary, and this is going to show me a lot of data. So what I like to do is, okay, I want to know the top apps crashing over the last 28 days. I don't care if it's happening per day. I want to know over the entire data set. So I am going to change this to the entire, I'm going to change this to a table. I like the table. And we can change this to the entire date range. And now it will count up all the crashes, right, for the top 10 Windows applications that crash, which are binaries, over the 28 days, but I'm counting up the entire date range. So if I change this to 7, it will actually give me 10 times 4. It will give me 40 different data points because it's going to split it by 7 days. And then I'll show you how this looks hard to read. It's giving me a lot of data, right? So give me, for the week of February 3rd, it gives me this. For the week of January 27th, it gives me this for that app. So you can see NVIDIA has multiple weeks. So the best way to view that type of data, if you're trying to split it up, is definitely a vertical chart, right? Like that. But if I'm in a table, I usually want to make the date range equal to frequency because I want to count it up over the entire date range. So it's almost like a report. If I want to see the top 20 apps, I just change that from 10 to 20. And then I'll add in 20. Okay. Now I want to know what version is crashing. So let's take, all right, I can filter on specifically like .NET exe. How about we go do that? So let's change the binary to .NET exe. I think that's Visual Studio. So this will dwindle down all the way to one record because I'm filtering just on that line. And then now I can change this to app version. And it should show me the version breakdown, or the top 20 versions if there's more than 20. So there's not that many, but now I can see the top versions by crashes. So very quick and easy, and I'll label this Visual can't type. And I'm done. If I wanted to look at foreground, I can simply just change this to foreground. And now I can see which app, or sorry, which version of .NET is launched the most by version on Windows. Okay. So this is not actually a binary that launches or has a UI. It looks like it's a background process, so it hasn't been launched that much. But that just shows you how you can quickly change the event name to look at something completely different.